Hi everybody, welcome to the In Crowd. We are live on Facebook. Thank you for joining us. Today we have award-winning set photographer Barry Wetcher. Barry, thank you for being here. I also want to thank you for reaching out on Facebook and kind of, making the connection and, just traveling to be here today. So it means a lot. And so what the In Crowd is basically, it's part profile. So we want to talk about your career as a set photographer in the film and TV industry here in New York. And also it's part educational, so people can get a feeling for how they may become a member of the In Crowd. So it's 50% profile, 50% educational, 100% fun. That's what we're going with. That's our new mission statement. So thank you for being here. And,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome. And we've been chatting and getting to know each other a little bit. And so one of the things you have always been fascinated with photography, and you were telling me that it started when you were a kid.
That's correct.
And you grew up in Brooklyn.
I grew up in Brooklyn.
The Brooklynite shirt.
Brooklynite, yes.
Can you tell us about kind of how the fascination with photography began for you?
I don't know how it began. It just was there. And the first camera that I ever owned was a Swinger Polaroid. It's called a Swinger Polaroid.
Which
was
we
a white
happen to have a picture
Polaroid.
of.
There you go. Yeah. And I got that for, my parents bought that for me for my bar mitzvah.
Oh, amazing.
So that was my first camera that I ever owned.
So did this printed an image as soon as you took the shot?
It was a Polaroid camera, yes.
And what did you find yourself documenting at 13?
Mostly my friends.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Mostly my friends.
And
people. It was always people.
But were you ever looking for something specific in the shots that you were getting?
So long ago, when I was 13, I really don't remember. But mostly my friends.
But you knew it just became your passion.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and then so you grew up in Brooklyn, and you had this Polaroid camera, and you mentioned to me that you had dreams of a better camera.
Yes,
you were dreaming of 35 millimeter.
Right. My goal or dream was always to own a 35 millimeter camera. It was sort of financially out of reach for me or my family. And then at some point I saved enough money where I purchased a Nikon Nicker mat.
I'm going to follow along with you right here. I got them.
There you go. So,
and this is a traditional film camera.
Yes.
You're loading in, you're winding,
yes.
and then you need to get those developed.
Process, yes.
Yeah.
So this was basically Nikon at the time. I think the F2, which was the pro camera, and the Nicker mat. This was a tank. It really was. It didn't have a motor drive, but it was a tank. I wish I still had that camera. Actually.
Motor drive. Can you extrapolate on what a motor drive is?
A motor drive would allow you to shoot, let's say, 9 frames per second.
Okay, I see.
You just keep your finger on the shutter, as opposed to advancing it with your thumb. So once I got that camera, I started to take more photographs of my friends who were kind of characters and sort of document what you might call street photography.
Nice.
So this was my first real entree into serious photography.
And so after you would get this, shoot a whole roll of film, where would you get it developed? Did you do it yourself, or did you bring it to a certain place?
I brought it to a local, when I lived in Brooklyn, to a local photo place that would develop, and you get contact sheets. Sometimes they'd print 3x5 black and white prints with a white border around it, which was pretty cool. Because
we're in the age of digital photography now, and so dark rooms are kind of...
Yeah, well, your dark room is light room.
Right. But there's something about, you have a negative, and you don't know what you're going to have until you shoot. You get 35... How many prints did you usually get out of a roll of film?
Well, there was 36... I don't know if in those days it came in 24. I think you get a roll of 24 exposures or 36, but basically the standard was 36 exposures.
All black and white, or were you doing some color photography?
I pretty much only shot black and white photography when I was that age.
And then how often would you get something and you were like, wow, I didn't even know I shot that?
Often, but then on the flip side, sometimes you'd be a little you'd be a little stoned on pot, and you think you got something great, and then you'd see it, and it sucked, man.
All black frames,
exactly.
flares all over the place. Yeah, I mean, there's something there in like the anticipation of the development that we don't really have today, because we're
very true.
in
Because
this
it's all instant gratification. So there's a positive side to that and a negative side. On a professional level, there's the positive side because you see what you shot. You don't have to worry if you miss the focus or something's in the frame that you don't want. Whereas previous to that, you couldn't do that. You had to wait, at least 4 hours to process slide film.
And I think maybe that could be, we'll talk a lot about like the secret of your success, but like as a photographer that has seen the transition from, film to digital in the still world, you actually probably just, you set up a lot more, right? Do you even, you know what I mean? Like you actually framing and the care it took when you were using a roll of film.
I think you were more careful in the amount of exposures you took, certainly, because you were limited to 36 shots before you had to change out. I think today in the digital world, people are just shooting and shooting and shooting.
Yeah.
It's not any more of a cost, whereas before you had to process the film that cost you money.
Yeah.
So if you shot 5 rolls of film, that's like approximately 180 shots. Whatever it cost, might have cost you $40 to process that. Today, you shoot 180 shots in like 10 seconds, and
no cost.
It doesn't cost you anything, other than the card you're recording on.
And so you've got your 35mm camera, you're doing street photography, but you end up wanting to go to college for a completely different reason.
I ended up going to farming school.
Farming school, okay.
I went to agricultural school. It was 1971, something like that. I wanted to be an organic farmer. So I went to an agricultural school.
Do you remember why you thought maybe that would be a path you wanted to pursue, organic farming?
I was interested in organic food at that time, and I was
ahead of your time, I've got to say.
Right. And I was interested in living in the country as opposed to the city. But needless to say, that only lasted about a year. So I never became an organic farmer.
All right.
But I did live on an organic farm in Rhode Island for a summer, and that was pretty cool.
And so the organic farming thing didn't work out.
No.
Okay. So then you find yourself taking a photography class.
Yes.
So you had all this knowledge of photography that you've been from 13 to 18 or 19 at this point, and you go to the new school?
Yes, I took a class at the new school.
And you meet somebody there.
Right. The teacher, instructor, his name was Dennis Simonetti. He was a photojournalist, and the class was more about a basic darkroom class more so than anything. Anyway, this guy really turned me on. He really, in a way, became my mentor. And the first time in the darkroom where I saw a print come up and it develop, I mean, that was fucking magic.
Yeah, this is you where you're actually developing and you're putting them. There's certain words for all the chemicals, right?
Right. A developer fixer.
Developer fixer, right? So you see the image come out, and it's magic.
It's magic. And I think that's probably true of anyone who's ever been in a darkroom for the first time. It's magic.
There should be more dark rooms. I think we need to. I mean, I was in a darkroom as well. Like the last semester of my high school, I did the darkrooms thing, and it was still
so you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's
magic.
Just, being able to, and also the care that it takes going into each image, because you don't want to waste a shot.
Right. Well, then you're burning and dodging. You're trying to make the image look better.
All your editing is happening right there.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas today, you have your phone. You go to Snapseed, and you can do pretty much anything very quickly.
And so, from the new school, you started to get more serious about photography.
That's right. So I got a job as an assistant to a photographer who only shot images of physical books, of books, which were used in the New York Times Sunday book review section.
Okay.
So, and we would work with a 4x5 camera, and all we shot was just books.
I found a 4x5 camera that we could show.
There you go.
Something like that, right?
Exactly.
And you needed a large format exposure. Can you speak to what a 4x5 camera is?
Well, it's just a 4x5 negative, so it's a huge negative. So your resolution when you print it is really sharp.
So very important in kind of print to have a larger. Right. So that this is pre-digital. So the larger the negative, the better the resolution.
That's correct. That's correct. So I did that for a while. It was pretty boring, but it was a job.
Photographing books, yeah.
It was, and then I assisted a couple of fashion photographers, and then I always did my own work. I work with a camera called a Wide Lux. I don't know if you pulled up an image.
I have one later in the. I do have a Wide Lux. Yeah.
Right.
It's this one.
Exactly.
Yep.
So
it's a panoramic.
Yes, it's a panoramic camera. It's a 140-degree angle, and they made two kinds. They made a 35 millimeter and 2 1/4 one. When a 35 millimeter, you got a half a frame more, and you'd be negative. So instead of it being a normal 1 frame, you got 1.5 frames. So the negative, the shot was about that long. And I would do stuff in the subways with it. I was really fascinated by motion. And I would shoot at a 15th of a second where the lens rotates really. That's how it captures.
Oh, really?
The lens rotates.
The lens actually moves inside.
The lens goes from here to here.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So
I have an image that we're skipping ahead. Let's show you. This is from 2000, actually, from a film you worked on, Center Stage.
That's
this is an actual Wide Lux shot.
That's correct. Yeah, I occasionally would break it out on a movie just for myself to have fun.
People are like, "What is that?"
Right, but it really worked for the shot. It's pretty cool. So anyway, at the time, the government was giving out 500 grants to 500 visual artists, and I applied, and I got a grant for 2 years.
I don't think many people know about grants. That's like a world that I'm not familiar with, but that's incredible. Yeah. So you just you apply for the grant. You say I'm a photographer.
Right. So I don't really remember the process, but at some point I had to go in there with my work, and you got judged by whomever was doing the judging. And it was a nationwide. It wasn't just a New York City thing. It was a nationwide. It was called CETA, C-E-T-A. It was similar to the WPA project. I don't know if you know about that. That was an FDR project. FDR project back, decades ago. In any case, I got a grant for 2 years, and part of the grant, part of the stipulation was I had to. I was what was called an artist in residence at Cooper Union, so I taught a class there, and I had some shows.
So some gallery showings of some of your prints and things of that nature?
Yes. In fact, we had a show. They teamed me up with a poet who had also gotten a grant. We had a show at the Queens Museum. We documented, it was sort of what you want to call it. It was sort of an orphanage that was run by the city. Not really an orphanage. It was kids who didn't have parents, who were mostly teenagers living in this Queens home, and we were sort of embedded in that place.
That's kind of photojournalistic in a way.
Right.
So you were,
but also it was sort of my street photography sensibilities, and that resulted in a show at the Queens Museum.
And then, well, you told me you were looking at the Village Voice.
Oh, right. Okay. I forgot about that. Yes.
And I mean, the Village Voice now is just an online publication but that used to be all over Manhattan, and every street corner you could open up and get a Village Voice and flip to the back, and there's a bunch of wanted ads, right?
That's correct.
All kinds of ads.
That's correct.
But you found a job posting.
There was a help wanted ad for a staff photographer for a publishing company, and I did a little research on it. It was a publishing company that put out musical instruction books as well as coffee table books about beautiful homes. And I did a little, you want me to go into the whole story?
Yeah, sure. I mean, absolutely. Musical instruction books.
Right, so I did a little...
There's a lot of books you're shooting here at the beginning,
So there's...
You found a niche.
I guess. There was, I did some research on the company, and I went to the library, which most people don't do anymore, and found some books about musical instruction, and I actually cut out those photographs. And when I went for my interview with these people, I said that those photographs were mine, and I got the job.
But you know what's funny about that story is those photographs could have been yours.
Probably not, but possibly.
but I mean, you were already skilled at this point, skilled
Right.
enough to do that work, and you found your way into it.
Right.
Kind of, I think this is good advice for anybody. Like, get your foot in the door.
Right. You got to get your foot in the door.
You got to get your foot in the door, because if not you, someone else
Right.
is going to do it.
And you know, I mean, I hate to say it, but you got to bullshit a little bit when you first start. You got, you know, it's the only way you're going to get in there.
Absolutely.
But as long as your skill set can back up that bullshit.
Yeah.
You know.
Before we went live, I said, I have no idea what I'm doing here, Barry. Like, I mean, that's actually a piece of advice that I take to heart.
Right.
You know, and it's this just say yes kind
Right.
of
Just
theology. Like, just go for it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say that you should lie, but
No, I'm not encouraging that, but
I mean, you know, in our business, in the film business, people pad when they first start, they're padding their resumes all the time. They might work one day on a movie and try to pass it off as they worked on the whole movie. The drag about that, or the downside, is the New York film industry is a really small industry, and everybody knows what everybody does. So you can't really bullshit
not going to
too
work
much
in the film and TV industry. So okay, there's a studio in the basement of this guy's brownstone, and you're working on coffee table books
and musical instruction. The publisher owned this beautiful brownstone on the Upper East Side, and the bottom floor he had a studio with a dark room. So the musical instruction books, that's what we would use that as a studio to photograph. And then also we would travel and photograph these beautiful homes, you know, for his coffee table books.
And so that happens, right? And you do that for about a year,
right.
And then I think actually you get the grant, and that it's so
long ago. I don't know the chronological order.
I don't know the order of what happened earlier before this interview, actually. But you somehow you find your way to a non-union horror movie.
Right.
How did that occur?
Right. I had a friend.
And I have a picture of you in the early 80s here, so we're going to go to that for a
second. Oh my God.
This isn't on that film, but you know what? It's in the same time frame. So.
Actually, that's from the movie Reckless.
Reckless, yeah.
And that's Aidan Quinn. That was his first movie.
Yeah.
And that's Daryl Hannah.
Yep.
She was
an awesome shot.
Kind of a big star then. Yeah. I had a friend that was an assistant director, and he was doing sort of reshoots on a horror movie that a friend of his had directed. And he let me do that. So I kind of got my chops down on, you know, feeling my way around a movie set. I'd never been on a film set. And mostly it was behind the scenes photographs. So that was my entree. Mm-hmm. And then I didn't really know anybody other than him, and he really wasn't, you know, connected at that point. So I saw another ad in Backstage.
Oh yeah, Backstage magazine, yep.
Where it was an ad where they were looking for a film crew. And I answered the ad, and they asked me to come in for an interview. It was a small, shitty office on Broadway off 14th Street. And it was New Line Cinema, which at that point had only really produced John Waters movies. You know who John Waters is.
The Divine, yeah, that whole
Pink Flamingo. They were pretty out there films. Anyway, they hired me for this movie. It was called Alone in the Dark. It was like their first legitimate horror movie. It was non-union. And it had like real stars, so to speak.
Yeah.
Jack Palance, Martin Landau, Donald Pleasance. And I'll tell the story.
Yeah.
I know you're going to
Jack
go.
Palance, yeah.
So my first day on the set, Jack Palance says to me, "Where's your blimp?"
Right.
And I'm like, "What the fuck is a blimp?"
And when Jack Palance says something to you,
right?
You listen.
Yes, you do. So I had to figure out what that was and how to get one, and it was only accessible. You can only get one from LA, so it took me a few days.
And a blimp goes around your camera body.
A still blimp looks like a lunchbox, and you put the camera in it. It has foam in it, and it doesn't completely silence the camera, but it deadens the sound enough that you're able to shoot while they're recording sound. So that was my first.
Pretty important thing to have. So,
yes, that was a key. You need to have that when you shoot stills on a movie, or you did then.
And that was Alone in the Dark.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was your first film, and here's your IMDb history, your filmography, if you will. Every movie you've worked on, and so, you know, just some highlights, obviously, like Goodfellas, The Sopranos, I Am Legends, Ocean 8. I mean, it's incredible. The sets that you've been on, and all the behind the scenes stuff that you've witnessed.
Right.
It's absolutely amazing.
Right.
Yeah, like you know, like a life in pictures, and you can actually see what you've done because you've been on all these incredible sets.
I've been blessed. That's how I call it. I've been blessed.
And so, actually, we have 1985. You do After Hours,
Right.
And Scorsese is directing that.
That's right.
This is one of your shots.
That's right. That's actually it's a bad print. It's a printout of a newspaper or something. Unfortunately, I don't have any of those prints, you know, where I could make a nice resolution print.
But in only 3 or 4 years, you're already working on a set with Martin Scorsese.
Right. I'm sorry. I owe that to this man. It's Michael Ballhaus, who became Marty's DP for many, many years. He was a German guy who I befriended on his first, or actually his second American movie, Baby It's You. And he kind of introduced me to Marty for After Hours, and that's how that came. I owe a lot to him. He passed away, unfortunately, but I owe a lot to him. He sort of really helped project my career.
So this is a good, you know, thing to kind of delve into, is the relationship between the set photographer and the DP.
Right.
And so there's a symbiotic thing that goes on there.
There can be.
Yeah.
It depends on the DP. Some DPs, especially when you're first kind of starting, don't really pay much attention to you, other than they're happy when you take their photograph. But Michael...
so that's a good tip. Make sure you do some BTS stuff of the DP.
Yes, absolutely.
And then,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but Michael, we became good friends, and he was instrumental, really, in, you know, sort of making my career kind of skyrocket. So.
Yeah. I have an early photo of you, actually, that I still in a snowy mountain. You got a big camera there.
Yeah, that's the blimp.
That's the blimp.
Yes.
There it is. Do you remember what set this was?
Yes,
or was
absolutely.
Yeah.
This was a movie called that probably nobody ever saw, called Sweetheart's Dance.
Sweetheart's Dance.
And it starred Don Johnson at the height of his
from Miami Vice fame. Yeah.
Don Johnson, Susan Sarandon, Jeff Daniels, and Elizabeth Perkins.
Okay.
And this was we shot in Vermont. And the last few weeks we ended up in the Keys in Isle Morada. So it was kind of like this.
That was change of pace from the snow to the...
This guy here, it's Mitch Amundsen. He's a pretty well-known DP now. This was Angelo DiGiacomo. He was a focus puller. And it's John Beeman. He was a camera operator.
And so, you know, at this point you're using Nikons.
I always
use Nikons,
yes.
not Canon.
Since that first Nicker mat, Nikons. You know,
why Nikon?
Well, at the time, Nikon was the premier camera. I mean, it was really Nikons or Canon, and Canon really wasn't considered a premier. Well, it's considered a good camera. Let's just say Nikon at that time was considered a premier camera, unless you're using Leicas. And those are rangefinders. That's a whole different ballgame. So my first real pro camera was a Nikon F2, which you don't have up here, but that also was a tank.
I got the F5 and the
D2X.
D2X, yeah. And so, do you find that is it about the resolution? Is it about the color science? What is it that Nikon? Why did Nikon become so prevalent? And is it still as prevalent today?
Well, the lenses were super sharp, and the cameras were just built great. You know, they were tanks. So they were the pro cameras, the premier pro camera at the time. When autofocus came to be, Nikon was a little behind the 8-ball, and Canon really took that and ran. And then they became the premier camera because their autofocus was incredible. So when you'd see sporting events, you'd see everybody with a white lens.
Yep.
The white lenses are Canon lenses. And then once digital came about, Canon had a full frame camera, and Nikon again didn't have that till much later. And I would say now it's an equal playing field. So it was sort of Nikon was up there in the 70s and 80s, early 80s, and then Canon, and now I would say it's kind of equal.
Now, on set, you are responsible for imagery that is going to be used mostly where? And this is a shot of Death of a Salesman. That's
I love that shot.
Dustin.
That's 1985. That's wow. That's almost I don't know how long ago. That's Dustin Hoffman. That's John Malkovich.
Yep.
And that's Stephen Lang. And that was directed by a guy named Volker Schlondorf. Thank you. So our main focus is publicity and advertising.
Yeah.
So our images are used, more often on posters, billboards. Whenever there was a review of a movie, back in the old days, whenever there was a review of a movie, there was always a photograph attached to it. Today, your photographs show up in all much different venues than they did then, but still, we call them posters, we call it the one sheet, and billboards. And, sometimes you see a bus going by and there'll be a shot and you're dead.
So you're doing stuff that's lit by the DP, you're right next to camera, you're shooting the actors, but also you do behind the scenes stuff.
Right.
And here's Paul Newman, Glass
Joanne
Menagerie,
Woodward,
1987. And your behind the scenes stuff ends up where? So it's not going to be on the one sheet, but
in those days,
this is late 80s.
Right, in those days there was Premiere Magazine and I think Film Comment. So those are kind of the only places where your stuff ended up. And like I said today, because of social media,
it can be everywhere.
It can be everywhere.
Yeah.
So,
in a way, your job has become more important.
Yes.
With the proliferation of social media, because the behind-the-scenes of people want to see.
Yes, they do. They absolutely do. But going back to when you said where are your photographs seen, back when I started, there used to be film stills in front of the movie theaters. So if you were going to see, Die Hard, in front of the movie theater, there'd be maybe 8 photographs, of the that we took of the movie. That hasn't existed in forever. So.
Also in 1989, this is Morgan Freeman, and this was shot on a Rolleiflex.
Yes.
Tell me about the Rolleiflex. This is an interesting looking camera.
It's a 2¼ inch negative. So again, you have a larger negative, so the resolution, is tighter, so you can blow it up bigger, and it'll still be tight. And this is a shot from the movie Lean on
Me. Yep.
And that's Morgan Freeman, who was playing Joe Clark.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know who he was. He was the principal of Patterson, New Jersey High School, which was like, not a good school. And he would chain the doors so kids couldn't leave. And he would walk around the school with a baseball bat and a megaphone. And Morgan did his life story. Yeah.
And part of your job, obviously, is also knowing all these cameras. I mean, it's got to be like you have to switch over to the knowledge of the Rolleiflex, and then you're back on a Nikon, and then you're using your wide lux, and so over time you've kind of gleaned all these different. But I mean, they all have the same. They all
serve the same purpose.
They all serve the same purpose. But.
So, if you were shooting when you were shooting film, if you were shooting something that you knew was going to be the poster, let's say you set it up in a studio, you'd need to shoot it with a larger format than a 35mm camera. So you'd use a Rolleiflex or whatever, a Hasselblad.
For print.
Right,
okay.
for print, so that they could blow it up really big, and it would hold. Today in digital, the cameras, the megapixels.
16, 20.
I mean, I use a Fuji, it's like 40.
Wow.
So you don't really have to worry about that so much anymore. Yeah, when I would break out the wide lux, that was really more for me. It was really for my head, because that was real. That image size is hard to put into a newspaper or a magazine.
And in 1989, 1990, you end up on Goodfellas.
Yes.
Which these images are absolutely iconic.
Right, thank you.
Especially this one, which this is the moment
Yeah,
Robert
that's
De Niro's
Billy Bats.
Yeah.
He's stomping Billy Bats. Actually, this image was rarely seen because, again, they didn't really use too many behind-the-scenes photos in those days.
Such a great photo.
And I happened to find this. So what's interesting is Irwin Winkler, who was the producer of this movie, he produced Creed.
Oh,
and
wow.
I hadn't seen him in whatever 30 years. He's probably in his 80s now. And I showed him that picture that you just had.
Oh yeah, this one.
Recently, and he made me send it to him, and he sent it to Marty, so that was kind of nice.
Yeah, we have some Martin Scorsese there with the script supervisor, Ray Liotta,
Right.
Joe Pesci.
Right.
Great shots. This one as well is just an incredible moment, right? Director and actor.
Yeah.
You're always there. You're there for these.
You try to always have your sensibilities, and in your peripheral vision, you gotta know what's going on.
This must have been between takes.
Yes, obviously.
So there's so much going on, right?
Right.
There's lights moving and cameras are shifting and dollies
chaos.
are being.
Chaos.
It's chaos. But you managed to find where you needed to be.
Yeah,
And that's part of your
sometimes
talent. I mean,
but
that's
sometimes
part of-
it's pure luck. You just happen to be right there at the right moment. But again, you always, you in your peripheral vision, you're always looking for a shot of the director
Right.
talking to the actor. Those are always key shots. And you don't want to be too intrusive, so you have to kind of weigh what's going on. But when you're on a movie and you've been there for months, everybody becomes comfortable with you, as long as you're not totally intrusive.
Yeah. You know what? One of my personal favorites that you worked on, What About Bob? Oh my God, this movie is hysterical.
Yeah.
And Frank Oz directed.
Frank
Which,
Oz
I mean,
directed
I've been
it.
telling everybody all day, like a little piece of trivia. Frank Oz also does Miss Piggy and Yoda. So,
That's right.
like, what was that set like? I mean, that had to be a really, really good time. But I mean, okay, all film sets, even if they're a comedy, come with their own level of,
Right.
You need
They
to
can
get the
be-
shot, you need to
right.
get the day.
I mean, for me personally, it was great. We shot in
Richard Dreyfuss and Bill Murray.
I can't even remember the name of the town, but it was the southwestern portion of Virginia, right near the Tennessee border. It was actually a dry county,
Okay.
and you couldn't buy alcohol.
No alcohol.
In that county. So, needless to say, Saturday nights, Bill would throw some great parties,
Okay.
and somehow he managed to get alcohol for us.
This is a classic. And a lot of your imagery was used in the
Publicity.
all the publicity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, today they use grabs sometimes because it's so with
Screen
CGI.
grabs from the actual.
Right, because there's so many CGI movies.
Oh, so they have to add
I'm
all
not
that
shooting
in.
a still. I'm not getting the final product
Yeah.
because they CGI it. So a lot of times they'll use grabs of CGI movies.
And you went on to do Die Hard with a Vengeance in '95.
Right. That was pretty cool.
iconic image. This was used in a lot of publicity.
Right. That's correct.
And this was part of this, three-part series of movies.
This was the third
trilogy.
one. This was I believe Die Hard with a Vengeance was the third one. And it was, for New York, it was like a big movie.
Yeah. What was that like to be part of a trilogy in the third, installment, such a big blockbuster?
I never worked on an action movie like that, so for me it was fascinating to see how that kind of stuff was done. We shot about half of it in New York and the other half in Charleston, South Carolina. It was really interesting to see how all that special effects was done. I mean, today it's probably done a little differently, but it was pretty cool.
One of the amazing things about working in New York is you also have TV, a lot of TV that happens here.
Right.
And so in 2001 and 2006, you're on The Sopranos.
That's correct. And as I was telling you before we started, somehow HBO found me. Season 3, they knew that I had done Goodfellas, so I guess they thought, oh, this guy's good at mob movies.
He knows the mafia. Bring him in.
Yeah, so as ridiculous as that is. And they hired me to I did that season, which I believe was right after 9/11.
Yeah. But you have a very kind of chill vibe about you. So maybe that's why I think in that setting, having that vibe is important, and probably being a photographer on set and just being kind of flying under the radar,
Right.
you know.
Well, that's important. I mean, one of the things that I've heard from studio publicity people regarding me is they feel they don't have to babysit me,
Right.
and they're really happy about that.
Yeah, nobody wants to do that.
babysit me.
Yeah. So, what's it like working on TV versus working on a film?
Yeah, I hadn't really done much TV. This is really the first kind of episodic thing I did.
And this shot in Jersey, I think,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Pretty much, I think it was like 100%, maybe once in a while we shot in the city. The main difference is that you're not, as a still photographer, you're not on every day. You're not working every day. So that can be difficult because you need to establish a rapport with the actors where they trust you. And, I think on this show, I think they were doing 9 days for an episode. They shot 9 days for an episode, and HBO gave me 6, so that was pretty good, you know. And I got to know the cast pretty quickly, and I was accepted by the cast, you know, very quickly.
And James Gandolfini.
He was great.
Yeah.
Jimmy was a great guy. You know, it's really sad that he passed, but he was a great guy. And interesting enough, I just worked on a movie called The Many Saints of Newark, which is
Is prequel or?
It's a prequel.
It's a prequel.
It's not really
The Sopranos.
Jimmy's story. It's the story of Christopher's father, Christopher being Michael Imperioli. And what's interesting though is Jimmy's real son, Michael Gandolfini, plays him
Oh, wow.
at
How
the
about
age
that?
of 15 or 16. So that's pretty cool.
And you also went on to do Devil Wears Prada,
Right.
which is just all about fashion too. So the photography in this. So who ends up editing your prints? Do you just hand them over to the studio? And we're also, this is 2006. So
this was digital.
we're experiencing the
Right.
shift now from film to
Right.
digital.
I think I went digital. Don't hold me to this, but I
That's
think
all
it was
right.
somewhere. If I looked at my credits, I could tell you. I think it was around 2003, 4, something like that. But this was all about the clothes, obviously.
Yeah.
And it was my first time working with Meryl. I worked with her subsequently after that, and she's a pro, man. She's a pro.
And so, do you hand your imagery off in
I'm
raw?
sorry,
You shoot raw, right?
I shoot
so
raw.
what ends up happening? Do you edit those yourself and turn them around, or do you just kind of say, "Here are all the images from today. You choose"?
In the film days, you just shot.
Yeah.
In the film days, you shot black and white and color. Right.
So
you
you
shot
have to
black and
switch
white
and-
and slides.
Shoot 30. Oh, you have two cameras.
Right. you
So
have two
one has
cam-
color, one has
Right,
black and
that's
white.
right.
You can
Because
switch
in
your
those
lenses or
days,
something.
newspapers were only black and white, so
Right.
you needed to shoot black because they didn't make conversions then. And then you shot mostly color slides, and then you just sent that to the lab, and that was it. You couldn't edit anything. You get contact sheets. In the digital world, I edit.
Yes.
But I do a hard edit of focus, things that shouldn't be there, bad faces, stuff
Yep.
like that. And then I make
So you're doing like selects.
right, and then I turn that to a lab, and that goes to the studio.
Got it. After that, you I Am Legend 2007
Right.
with Will Smith.
Right.
It's awesome, sprawling movie,
was great.
all over New York City.
Right.
Many locations.
Yes.
Some. Were there any challenging locations in that film?
I wouldn't say they were challenging
Yeah.
locations. The biggest challenge was to try to keep civilians out of your frame because it's supposed to be this guy's.
He's alone.
It's just
And
him.
there's zombies after him.
So that might have been the biggest challenge. But we did some, as I was telling you before, we closed down the upper level of the George Washington Bridge.
That was the first and
First
only
and
time.
ever time.
That's not going to happen
We
again.
shut down Columbus Circle.
Wow.
We shot inside St. Patrick's Cathedral, which had never been done before. Unfortunately, that was cut. So it was pretty cool what we did.
That has to be kind of simultaneously like a little spooky and a little cool to be in the middle of Columbus Circle with no people. Just where you just shoot?
No, actually, what was spooky was the George Washington Bridge.
Okay, the George Washington
And you
Bridge.
owned the George Washington Bridge. That was pretty cool.
Part of the responsibility of the set photographer is just kind of like documenting some of the technology that's being used as well, right? And so here's Woody Harrelson.
Right.
This is Now You See Me, 2013.
Right.
And it's kind of amazing to see this before it's, keyed and edited and CGI'd. And it's
Well, when we're shooting stuff like this, there's really nothing for me to do other than to capture behind-the-scenes photographs.
Yeah.
Right. So, you try. That's where you can be more creative than just capturing a scene, because now you can really try to make something cool. Whereas when you're just capturing a scene, you're just looking for a moment, and it's not. You can't be quite as creative as you can when you're doing behind-the-scenes photographs.
Some of your, you have a great Instagram, by the way.
Thank you.
Everybody should follow Barry at Barry Wetcher and check out your website. And but you have a lot of imagery from Creed and Creed 2. You did both of them.
Yeah.
What do you look for when you're on the set? And because there's some really excellent photography that's on your Instagram and from Creed and the behind-the-scenes stuff and Sly Stallone and Michael B. Jordan. What are you looking for when you're out there?
Well, you're always looking for a moment. You're always looking for some sort of emotion. You're looking, you're looking for a frame that tells a story, basically. And that's your goal. Your goal is that in one photo, there's a story there, So when I approach a movie, you hope that in every scene, there's something that could tell a story about that scene or about the entire movie. It doesn't always happen. And that comes with doing it a long time. Sometimes you just have to walk away and say, there's nothing here. I'm shooting shit. I don't want to shoot shit. So.
In some of these instances, this is lit for a camera, or maybe it's a 2-camera shoot. But do they sometimes move the camera out so you can take the shot?
Yes. Sometimes if there's a key scene where you can't really get a good position, you can't really get a good shot, you might ask for a hold or a freeze. I don't like doing that because the actors never recreate what they just have done. They're not really going to act the scene for you. They may, but they're pantomime, and it's not the same. For me, the audience might never know the difference, but for me, there's a difference.
So you just try and get the
actual
real performance.
I'm trying to get the real performance.
So are you right next to camera here? In this shot?
This shot, yes. The camera's probably, that's Ryan Coogler. He's the director.
Yep.
So, and these two guys have a very special relationship. This is a moment where, it's a special moment between two guys that have some unique relationship.
Yeah.
So, yes, I was near the camera.
Awesome stuff from that film.
Thank you.
And then Girl on a Train in 2016.
Right.
Some really beautiful imagery from this film.
Right. Actually, one of your camera operators went there.
Yeah. Alex, he was there.
Yeah, that was a fun movie. It was a good book. I think it was a good movie. Yeah, and we had it was my first time working with a woman. Is it my first time? I think it might have been my first time working with a woman DP.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is beautiful light here.
Yeah.
And one of the things you talk about is there are DPs who can paint with light.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
Well, this is painting with light, where they're actually, painting a canvas with light, and it makes for dramatic photography, and that can make me shine or not.
Makes your job
makes me
a little easier.
Makes me happy.
Makes you happy.
Makes me happy.
Here's a great behind-the-scenes shot of you. This was
from the Many Saints of Newark. This is actually from this year. And this was taken by the DP, Kramer.
There are not many behind-the-scenes shots of you.
No.
So we need you to take more selfies.
This is taken by Kramer Morgenthau, who was the DP on.
Cool lighting.
Yeah, actually, what this is I can't give away the movie, but at the beginning of the movie, there's a short narration by one of the characters that you will know from Sopranos, and this is how he lit that person.
And you were also the vice president of Local 600.
Right, the national
vice president of Local 600, which is the camera operators union.
Well, it's not the camera operators, actually. We're called the International Cinematographers Guild. So it's DPs, cinematographers, camera operators, focus pullers, camera assistants, digital imaging technicians, and still photographers.
And so, as the VP of a union, what was your responsibility? Because I mean, this is kind of like an incredible pinnacle of your career to become the national VP of the union that you've been working in for 30 or so years.
I wouldn't say it was a pinnacle of my career. Really, I wouldn't. But I would say receiving a Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Society of Camera Operators was much more dear to me. But I was always involved in our union and feel that it's really important that the union protect its workers. Because in the film business, as you know, you could work 18 hours a day. You can not eat for 18 hours. And sometimes the conditions in terms of that are kind of inhuman.
Yeah, that's not fair. So the union is there to prevent that from happening.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah. And so in your time there, what did you do?
Well, first, that's a volunteer position, so it's not like I work for the union. That's a volunteer position. As there's 7 national offices, so in a way, I wouldn't say we set policy, but we kind of try to formulate policy that would get passed by the board, the National Executive Board. So the offices would try to figure out a policy, and they try to get that policy passed.
And have you seen in the last 10, 15 years, because this boom of content, right? I mean, with all your streaming services and all your networks and Netflix and Amazon and now Apple TV Plus, and I mean, you just got so much content is being created. What do you think about that in terms of how it's affected the film industry and TV industry in New York and nationally?
Well, New York now is a TV town, and that's great for people who work in the film industry. There's just so much work. In fact, Local 52, which is a studio mechanics local, is basically just pulling people off the street to work. I mean, they just don't have enough members, so that's good and bad, because you don't want unskilled labor moving heavy equipment, which could be dangerous. So New York has really become a TV town. There are fewer and fewer features being shot in New York, and that's mainly because there's no studio space. Because a studio would rather have a TV show in, which might last for 5 years, than a movie that's just going to be there for 5, 6 months. So that's sort of a drag. This summer was unusual. We had about 4 or 5 major movies shooting at once. But for the most part, that hasn't existed for quite a while.
And we were speaking a bit about traveling for work and the way that there's been like little pockets of, because of tax incentives that have been offered in other cities like Atlanta, like Stamford, Connecticut, these towns, and all of a sudden, studios go there. And so the supply and demand kind of occurs. So there's crews locally now. Right.
So, going back to the 80s, 90s, they used to travel people from New York to other places in the eastern region, and they still do, but it's less and less because places like Atlanta now have a huge pool of skilled labor, so they're not going to travel someone there and put them up. They're going to use local labor. So those opportunities are less than they used to be. There's more opportunity to work in New York, and less opportunity for New Yorkers to go out of town.
It's kind of like a give and take, right? So you did talk about your awards. So you did get, in 2014, a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Society of Camera Operators, and in 2016, Excellence in Unit Still Photography Award from the Publicists Guild of America. And this is actually... This is from Local 600.
This is from Local 600. It was, his dedication, commitment, and record of service, bringing it on to himself. And so it was basically awarded to me by the union for my service to the union. And what's dear to me about this is they always give 2 awards, one to someone who's passed, and then to someone who was alive. And I shared the award, so to speak, with a DP named Harris Savides, who was a very well-known DP who had passed from brain cancer. So I shared that award with his family, and that was really special.
Pretty great moment.
Yeah.
So mirrorless cameras.
Right.
So we've gone from the DSLR kind of to digital single lens reflex. Is that what that stands for? And now you're using Fuji's.
Yes.
In an interview with Fuji, you say you're like 85% Fuji, 15% Nikon.
So, yes, that's true. So a movie like Creed, for all the boxing imagery, I shot Nikons because for action, this camera just couldn't keep up focus-wise with what my Nikons could do. For anything that wasn't boxing related on Creed, I use Fuji. So I pretty much use Fuji as much as I can, and when it comes to action, I use Nikons.
Because these have the ability to have the electronic shutter, and they're silent, virtually silent.
Right, so no longer do you have to use a blimp, which is what we talked about. In an electronic shutter mode, this is completely silent, and you could do things with these cameras that you can't do with a DSLR. You know, the back screen flips, I don't have to lay on the floor to get a shot from the floor. I could just, it's great.
Yeah.
I mean, you could get shots that you couldn't get before.
Did you shoot Ocean's 8 with Fuji? And
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
So here's some of your imagery, Times Square. These are great shots.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's another amazing aspect of your job is that this was a studio shoot, basically, with a white cyc, and it was lit for you, and you're working with these actors and actresses. And this is phenomenal.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I mean, I've had, obviously, billboards in Times Square before, but this one wraps around from Broadway. That would be 7th Avenue on the other side, I believe. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So I want to ask your opinion on something.
Yes.
Cell phone photography. This is the iPhone 11 Pro. What do you think?
Well, I just saw this the other day. A friend of mine had it. Well, it's great. It has a wide lens, a telephoto, and a normal lens.
Do you think you're going to get one?
No. I mean, maybe, down the road, but I'm not running out to get it.
Right.
I think this is great because it allows anyone to take photographs.
Yeah.
And, let's face it, our world has totally changed. Everybody's a photographer.
Yeah.
Everybody's got, some sort of software to make you look glamorous and beautiful. There's the downside to that, but the fact that people want to take images, and I'm not talking about selfies, but that people want to take photographs is great.
Yeah. How much of your job is creative and how much of your job is technical?
Well, there's always a technical aspect to it. That's a good question. There's always creativity in it, even though I didn't do the lighting, right? So that's not my lighting, but there's the creative moment of knowing what to capture, how to capture it, what lens to use, and what's your composition. Yeah. So there's always creativity involved in that.
Right.
Maybe not as much as you might want. So.
And then you've got the whole make sure it's in focus.
Right.
You're choosing your f-stop, you're choosing your shutter speed. So
one of the things about doing stills on the film set is you are a slave to the DP's lighting, and you are a slave to the blocking of the scene. So let's say you're on a show where they're using 3 handheld cameras. Right.
And so those are moving.
So you got three people plus, their assistants now are far away, but you have 3 people plus a grip with each camera, holding the wires, the cable, and there's like no room for you.
Frenetic,
it's frenetic. That's hard. That can be really hard to make good photographs in that kind of situation.
I want to say congratulations on an incredible show. So it just closed yesterday, but maybe it'll pop up again. Photoville, and this was like 50 or so containers in Brooklyn Bridge Park. 80 containers in Brooklyn Bridge Park. One which was completely devoted to the Society of
Motion Picture Still Photographers, which is a society sort of similar to the ASC, if you know what that is.
For cinematographers,
right. Yeah. So we're about 50 photographers internationally who do some really incredible work. So,
most popular trailer by far at the entire event.
Brought the most joy to people. I have to say.
Here's some of your images from inside there. The Goodfellas one,
right?
Which, it's incredible. And also, I mean, just some iconic images of like from the set of Jaws, Star Wars. So like the set photographer gets to see the coolest stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most enjoyable things about the job is that you can get to experience some really incredible things. Like I've shot basketball. I played a basketball game in Madison Square Garden. I've hit a baseball in Yankee Stadium. Those are really, that's some pretty cool
You
stuff.
stood on the George Washington Bridge
with
no
nobody.
traffic, which is very, very seldom.
That's true.
Chris Christie, we have to find Bridgegate.
I also want to say that for me, there's three elements to a film project that can make me happy. One is a visual. Am I going to get juiced by the images, by the imagery? The second would be, is the acting so good that I'm just privileged to watch that?
Yeah.
And three is it a great experience? Is the crew, the director, the actors, are they fun? Rarely do all three of those things exist, but sometimes they do. But if a movie has just one of those things, I'm happy.
Do you know when you've taken the photo?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah? You feel it?
Yes.
It's like, I got it.
You absolutely.
You just put your camera down. You're like,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah?
Without a doubt.
Well, I want to thank you for coming out here. And, kind of like my final question to you is, what's your advice to somebody that wants to be a member of the in crowd, that wants to get into the film and TV industry, that may be a burgeoning photographer and doesn't know, like, Barry Wetcher's been doing this for, 30, 40 years and he's got this incredible portfolio. I don't even know how to start.
Right. So I'm only going to speak about New York.
Sure.
Because I can't really speak about other regions. I mean, right now, as I said, it's so incredibly busy that there's opportunities for people that didn't exist. When I started, it was a father-son union. If you weren't related, you didn't get in. I was really lucky and fortunate. So today, if you're actually a minority, there's a lot of places where you can start. The mayor's office offers a program where they'll train you to be a PA, and I think they actually place
Made
you.
in New York?
Yes,
Yep.
through the Made in New York program. And I think they'll actually place you on a movie.
That's a great foot in the door. Great.
If you happen to fit into that category of minority, you could look into that. Otherwise, I always tell people who do what I do, if you know people who are doing independent, really low budget movies, offer your services for free. You'll figure out what a film set is, and you'll navigate that, and you'll network off of that. It's all about network.
Sure.
You know that. Everybody in this room knows that. And hopefully...
But I think that's a skill that, networking is a skill that has to be honed, and it's a learning process.
Right.
Sure, we have social networks.
Right.
I mean, kids are growing up with those now, but there's still something to the interpersonal relationships that you build in the film industry, not burning bridges, that kind of thing.
It's absolutely about relationships, without a doubt. I mean, I get hired by producers and directors, sometimes by actors, and that's all about relationships. I mean, in the beginning, you don't have those relationships, but the first movie you work on, you'll meet people, and those people will then do another movie, and maybe they'll take you with them or whatever.
Is it hard living that freelance life?
Absolutely. You have to be, as you and I have talked about, you have to be of a certain personality. Not everybody can do it because you never know where your next job's coming from.
When the film is over,
it's over.
It's over.
You're done, man.
But at least you get a break.
Right. What happens is, 'cause as we talked about, a film crew becomes your family for whatever, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. And oftentimes people have just started in business. When that movie's over, they're lost.
Yeah.
Because
what do I do
your
now?
family's like gone away.
Hopefully you get to roll that over, maybe meet them again.
Right.
Down the road.
Well, if you're successful in this business, you will meet those. I mean,
and it's like a reunion.
Right. I've worked on a movie, and then re-met somebody 30 years later that I hadn't seen in 30 years on another film.
It's kind of a beautiful thing, actually,
Can be.
when you can reconnect with people. Because it is, we were talking about this, you're going to battle with
Yes.
these people every
It's
day.
definitely a war.
Yeah, special bonds are built. So that's all my questions, but we do have a question from the audience, from the stream. We've opened it up live. Are you currently working on any interesting projects you can tell us about? And what's next for your career?
Okay, so I'm just about to start a Jennifer Lopez movie called Marry Me.
Okay.
It stars Jennifer Lopez and Owen Wilson and Sarah Silverman.
That's an awesome cast. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, we start
Is it
shooting.
kind of a rom-com thing?
Yeah, kind of.
Nice.
It's for Universal. We start shooting that next week. And what was the second part of the question?
What's next for?
What's next for me?
Yeah, your career. Yeah.
I'm hoping to actually. I'm winding down.
Okay.
So I'm hoping to do just one movie a year and maybe to teach. I'm looking
Excellent.
to teach. I did a mentorship program through my union. And I enjoy helping people. I want to pay it forward.
Yep.
So that's kind of where my head is at.
Well, I just want to say again, thank you for coming down to be on the In Crowd today. It's been an awesome conversation, and yeah, just I don't know, congratulations on such an incredible body of work. People should definitely go follow you on Instagram, and also check out your website, barrywetcher.com. It's in great galleries here as well. And thanks, Barry. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
All right. See you next time on the In Crowd.